used to work at a security company with a bunch of friends. We all got along well, and most of us even hung out after work. The ones I didn't hang out with kept to themselves. They were two brothers that worked nights with me, and they were in their own group. They were new to the company and would have many conversations about their guns. Bill was the older brother, and Luke was the younger. After hearing Luke and Bill talk about target shooting so much, I developed an interest. I don't own a single firearm, but my roommate owns several. I mentioned at work one night that I was going shooting in the morning with my roommate, and I needed a good place to go to. Well, the two brothers pointed out a spot on Google Earth for me and said it was great, and they have gone shooting up there once before. It was about 45 minutes away and was higher up in the mountains. I knew the spot precisely due to a single image posted to the coordinates on Google Earth with used shotgun shells covering the ground. I decided that it was as good a spot as any and told my roommate Don where to drive us. We arrived the next morning at 10 a.m. and parked at the top of the hill. We saw our spot about 150 yards away in a clearing down in the valley and began hiking down. A quick side note, I wore this bright neon yellow hooded sweatshirt at work, and during the winter, I'm also a pretty large fella. Being big and brightly colored makes you very visible from far away. I've seen hunters using bright colors to avoid accidentally getting shot by other hunters. I decided to wear my trademark bright hoodie on our little hike. We made it a quarter way down the hill, and I see a group of fellow target shooters at our desired spot. These were the only other people we had seen in 30 minutes. Our spot is taken. Lame, I said. The second I said lame, that's when shit hit the fan. We were on the side of the mountain, walking down towards them, and the rounds started flying. This group was shooting at us. Don and I were targets for about 3 guns, and we didn't have immediate cover. I see Don running across the mountain, strafing the shooters. I see what he is running for. It was a small plateau about 20 yards next to us. The sounds of bullets flying inches away from my ears is a sound that I will never forget. Movies do not do the sound justice at all. Not even close. I still get chills thinking about it now. The vibration and the rotation of the bullets chilled my bones. It's not a sound I would want to hear again. It made everything go slow-mo and very clear. My adrenaline was kicking in. We made it to cover and hit the dirt. We were pinned down, but at least we had cover now. I had to have heard at least 100 rounds pass just over the lip of the plateau. I heard a pistol, a rifle, and a shotgun. I know I did. The trees, boulders, and mountainside were being hammered by round after round. If we had sat up from our cover, we would have been shot in the face. These people were shooting up a hill, towards a road. They had their backs to their paper targets. Thinking back on it, my father said I should have yelled down to them and let them know they were shooting at 2 people and to hold their fire. But the thing is, I think they knew they were shooting at us. How could they not? We weren't that far, and the mountainside was almost bare. I didn't want to let them know they were close to hitting us. I should have shot back. We had the high ground, but I'm not a killer. We just waited and listened for their footsteps and wanted them to stay where they were. If we were killed, no one would have found our bodies out there. 15 minutes went by, and the gunfire didn't let up until it just ended. The mountain was quiet again. After about 5 more minutes of silence, we checked down the hill. They were gone. We had our guns ready as we scanned the valley down below. Nothing more. No more guys. No vehicle. Just their garbage left behind. We decided it was a great time to get the hell out of the hills. We made it back to our car and back to our house faster than ever. When I went back to work the next shift, I told this story to everyone. I even thanked Bill for the sweet advice. He apologized for the bad locals and said, "That's crazy." Another coworker told me that Bill and Luke went shooting that same morning in the same area. I asked Bill immediately about it. I asked him where he went shooting and what guns he brought with him to shoot. He pointed at the same damned Google Earth image as before. Luke, his friend, and Bill were using a Glock, a .22 rifle, and a 12-gauge shotgun. It was all coming together so quickly. I told him that he was a psycho and almost killed us. He denied shooting at us, even changed his mind about where they went shooting. He said it was actually 2 miles west because his GPS was inaccurate. I knew that he was lying, but what could I do? I had no proof. He worked with me for another 2 years before I moved away and never heard from them again. I remember how emotionless he was when he denied shooting at me. He was like a robot. We never spoke of it after that first time, and I haven't gone shooting since. To give a little bit of background information, this started in the winter of 2012. I was 23 years old at the time and living with my dad. My mom and my brother were living in another house, about 10 minutes away from us. One morning, I woke up at around 8 a.m. because I had an early doctor's appointment. I went outside to see a note pinned to the windshield wiper of our car. The note said, "I'm going to kill you, fucking pedophile scum." I kind of just laughed it off. I assumed the note was for my dad, who had a habit of complaining to parents in our neighborhood about their children's shitty behaviors. There were these twin boys who liked to try and catch and torture squirrels. He often marched them home by their ears to complain about them to their parents. I thought one of the parents was just being a douchebag, so my dad and I didn't bother with it too much. Later in the day, while talking to my mom on the phone, I mentioned the note to her, offhandedly in a very casual way, and I was shocked by her response. She responded by very emphatically warning me several times to make sure all of my windows and doors were locked and to bring a weapon to bed with me at night. I was a bit taken aback because she had never said anything to me like that before. She had never even given me the good touch, bad touch talk. She reminded me at least 12 times over the course of the conversation to bring a knife or a baseball bat with me to bed and to lock my bedroom door at night. I thought she was just overreacting, so I waved her off. Then other weird things started happening. We started getting random packages and deliveries sent to our house, Bibles and Korans, newspapers, porn flyers and pizzas, and moving trucks that we hadn't ordered. The first few times it happened, we thought it was a mistake, but it kept happening. I came to the conclusion that somebody must be pulling a prank on us. We didn't know who it was, so there was nothing that we could do about it, but apologized profusely to yet another confused pizza delivery man. In September of that year, I started taking a night school class with my best friend. The course went from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every Monday and Wednesday night. And after the class, his mom would come pick us up and drive us home. Sometime in November, his mom dropped me off from school, and I went inside and chilled out on the couch for a couple of hours. I like to wind down a little bit before I go to bed, or I can't sleep. I ended up falling asleep on the couch. Something woke me up abruptly. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car tire being slashed, and it sounded like our car. What the hell was going on? We didn't have any enemies. In retrospect, this was probably a stupid thing to do, especially considering that a relatively small female, only 55, and was 23 at the time. But I grabbed a generic kitchen knife and went outside to check it out. When I got outside, I discovered immediately that I was correct. There was a man in our driveway slashing our tires. Unwisely, I immediately yelled, "Hey, you!" and he turned around to face me. That's when I noticed that he was slashing our tires with an enormous hunting knife, at least 6 inches long. He looked surprised, but then defiant, and began to advance towards me with the knife slightly raised. I just froze. I didn't know what to do. He was coming at me so fast, I couldn't even think. Thankfully, at that exact second, my across-the-street neighbor, who had also heard him slashing our tires, turned his porch light on and yelled out the window, "Hey, I'm calling the police." The man yelled back, "I don't give a fuck. Call them." But he quickly retreated back to his car, where I could see a middle-aged woman with long brown hair waiting for him in the passenger seat. Our eyes locked, and I knew instantly we had met before. I couldn't quite put my finger on when or where. I just knew in my gut that I've met this woman before. They sped off into the night, and we called the cops, who said they couldn't do anything for us because they didn't know who had done it. I mean, isn't that kind of your job, though? To find out who? I called my mom and told her what happened and asked her if she had any idea who had done this to us. She immediately said no, but there was something in her voice. I could just tell that she wasn't being honest. A few weeks later, I decided to go to my mom's house and spend a day or two there, determined to get some answers. As soon as I walked in the front door, I knew something was wrong. The second she saw me, she just started bawling her eyes out. She took me by the hand and sat me on the couch and explained the whole story to me, start to finish. It's necessary for me to give a bit of background information here. My mother is a businesswoman by trade. She was still in sales at the time, but she is also a bit of a hippy-dippy. It's retrograding, so I don't get into any arguments with this weak type of person. On the side of her regular day job, she was selling Arbani makeup, which is a all-natural brand of makeup that is free of parabens, oils, sulfates, and other common cosmetic additives. A couple of months before this all started, she ended up being referred a new client named Andrea by her weed dealer. Yes, my mom smokes weed. This is Canada. Everyone smokes here. Andrea was the dealer's girlfriend, and she was interested in buying Arbani. So my mom invited her over to her apartment to look at some makeup samples. They started chatting about a variety of topics, as women do, and my mom let it slip that her last name was Hayes. As my mom told me, Andrea paused for a few seconds, looked at her, and said, "Hayes, did you used to be married to a man named Darren Hayes?" My mom answered that, yes, Darren Hayes, my father, was her ex-husband. And then, shockingly, this Andrea woman actually bursted into tears, threw my arms around my mom in a hug, and began to tell her a story about all the disgusting things that my dad had done to her. Apparently, when she was 14 years old, she's now in her mid-30s. I would have been 4 years old at the time, and this would have happened around 1994. She had been dating a man named Andrew, who had been living with my dad at the time after my parents divorced. According to Andrea, this man, her new boyfriend, Andrew, Andrew's twin brother, Daniel, and my father, had taken turns beating her, raping her, and forcing her to prostitute herself in order to make money off her. Eventually, they ended up selling her to child prostitution, from which she said she had never recovered. At this point, I realized that this is where I recognized her from. My dad had been roommates with her boyfriend, Andrew, and I used to see all three of them when I went over to visit him every second weekend. She sobbed inconsolably during the whole retelling of this story, telling my mother how after this traumatic experience, she had turned to drugs and alcohol to numb the pain of her abuse, and she had been addicted to crack and alcohol off and on ever since because of what my father had done to her. My mom was shocked. She didn't know what to do. On one hand, she knew my father to be a generous, soft-spoken, and kind person who never lifted a finger to her or to any person, and who rarely raised his voice. But on the other hand, it seemed odd that Andrea would just happen to remember his name all these years later. If she had been lying, she didn't know who to believe. After several hours of crying and much consoling on my mother's part, Andrea finally left, and that's when the stalking began. A few days after this encounter, my mom came home from work to find Andrea's boyfriend sitting on the couch, waiting for her. He immediately told her that he was planning on killing my dad, and that my dad deserved to die because he was a pedophile, rapist piece of shit, and that if my mom told anybody at all, especially the cops, he would be sure to kill me as well. He then concluded his threat by describing the layout of our living room and exactly what outfit I was wearing that day. From then on, he and/or Andrea would text or call her several times a day to threaten and taunt her, telling her that they were going to call the cops on my dad and have him thrown in prison. They were going to have him killed, and if she told anybody, they would hire someone to rape and murder me. Naturally, my mother was absolutely terrified. She was from an upper middle class family who immigrated to Canada from Germany. She had never dealt with this type of person before. She stopped eating. She couldn't sleep, and she even stopped going to work. She lost 30 pounds, and her hair started to fall out from stress. She started having panic attacks because she didn't know what to do. Later, she told me she understood how I felt now because I have an anxiety disorder that causes me to have panic attacks. Eventually, after the night I almost got stabbed, she decided that she had to call the cops. She couldn't take the chance that they would hurt me. She had to do something about it. And what she found out was shocking. Andrea was well known to the police. When my mom told them this story, she was so well known that they weren't even surprised to hear her story. In fact, they told her Andrea had done this exact same thing to at least a dozen other men. She would meet and blackmail men into giving her money, electronics, drugs, etc., threatening to call the cops and report them for rape if they didn't. Her boyfriend, who was a dealer of other drugs than just weed, turned out would often use his drug connections to intimidate and extort the men. And for some reason, he never questioned her stories of being raped, abused, and enslaved by all these different men, because there was no doubt in my mind that he genuinely believed that she was telling the truth. Then, when Andrea, who was a crack and heroin addict and prostitute, would get arrested on a possession or a drug distribution charge, would attempt to make deals with the police by offering them information about men who were rapists and pedophiles in exchange for less prison time. She eventually did this so many times that the police stopped believing her. After Mom called the cops, the whole story came undone, and Andrea and her boyfriend thankfully haven't bothered us since. But it's been over a year since the whole thing happened, and I'm still terrified to leave the curtains open at nighttime in case somebody is watching me. I don't think I'll ever be able to feel fully safe in this house ever again.